episode 3 of the Shuster Herald. I'm your host, Sam Rizzo.
I'm your co-host, Adam Basciano.
And today on the show, we'll be looking at episode 2, called A Kind of Princess of the Superboy show. And then we'll be looking at the tie-in comic, number 2.
And we'll also be giving you a wrap-up of the weekly Superman news. Sam, why don't you give our listeners a brief description of the second episode and tell us the little pertinent bits of information, like the guest stars and whatnot?
Well, episode 2 of Superboy saw Clark dating not Lana Lang for a change, Sarah Danner, and it's Sarah's 18th birthday, and her father is coming to Shuster to meet her new boyfriend. And what Clark doesn't know is that her father is the largest mob boss, and the episode kind of picks up from the two meeting after Superboy saves him from a car bombing. You see Clark's relationship with Sarah and Lana's jealousy of the whole situation, which was really cool to see. What did you think of the episode, Adam?
You know what? I actually really like this one, Sam. I liked it more than the first episode that we reviewed, the previous episode.
And it was interesting because the two guest stars this week, Sarah Danner was played by Julie McCullough, and Matt Danner, her father, was played by Ed Winter. And Julie, up until Superboy, was really only known for, like, Growing Pains. She was on The Golden Girls, and then after Superboy, she was on Beverly Hills 90210. And then Ed Winter, he was steeped in television acting. He was in Dynasty, Dallas, and he did like 14 episodes of Project UFO. And
interesting.
And also he was in MASH. So the guy was always consistently on television.
And I feel remiss if I don't point this out for the fellow red-blooded males out there, Sam. I believe the actress who played Sarah Danner had a stint in Playboy. Am I correct in that?
Yes, she did. She did.
Not that I read that publication. I'm just, throwing that out there because it's,
And
I just want to know this information. How about we get into the episode now, our thoughts and our likes and dislikes. I'll start, and then maybe you can feed off of, we can bounce off each other, Sam. One of the things I found really interesting is the mob presence in this episode. So far, we've seen Superboy, in the first episode, he really didn't battle anything, but I don't want to belittle the mob, but they're like street criminals. They're a higher echelon of street criminals, and I like the fact that early on in this series we're getting that, because in the early Superman books way back in the late 30s, early 40s, Superman largely handled the street hoods, the criminal, the common criminal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was a social crusader.
So I like that they're, at least to start, maintaining that link to the past. I kind of like that. The other thing, what do you think about the mob presence before we go any further?
No, I totally agree with you, Adam. I like how the writing team actually went back into the Superman mythology, or the lore, so to speak, of the early Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, with Superman fighting small-time crooks. Yeah, I like how they paid respects to that with this episode.
One of the other things that really impressed me with this episode, not impressed me, but that I liked, is that right off the bat, you see Clark having lunch, I guess it was, in the whatever it is. Is that part of the university, or the I guess cafeteria or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, it was
with Sarah Danner. She's very attracted to Clark, and I like this because I think it's fair to say that up until this point, Clark was portrayed as the bumbly, geeky guy in certainly the comics and the Christopher Reeve movie, and Clark wasn't really the kind of guy that attracted women. Like, women sort of ignored him, you know what I mean? Even Lois in the movies ignored him. So
always dismissed. He was
right,
always
and
dismissed.
even exactly dismissed is a better word than ignored. But even in the Adventures of Superman, he wasn't really a ladies' man, nor should he be an over-the-top ladies' man. I'm not saying he's Don Juan or anything, but I like the fact that this is the first instance where we see a Clark who is a little bit more confident and gets a little bit more credit from the ladies, a little bit more notice.
And I like how John played it off like, Sarah Danner was the more aggressive one in the relationship, and Clark was, as he should be, kind of hesitant on going forward, or, I think Clark had in the back of his mind, Lana, what would Lana think? It seemed that way sometimes.
Probably it looked that way, but I like the fact that here is the first episode where, at least from Lana's perspective, you get a hint, there's definitely there, and you finally get a sense that, okay, she may have feelings for Clark that extend more beyond just friendship, you know what I mean? This is the first time we actually see that, so I like that little... It was, again, this show has managed to, in 2 episodes, it hasn't been a great sampling, but in 2 episodes, they've hinted that there might be something more between these two,
Hmm.
but they haven't thrown it in your face.
Right.
I like it. I like it the way the pace they're going for 2 episodes in.
And you saw it when Clark and Sarah were dancing on the dance floor. Lana she kept looking over there, just checking on Clark and Sarah like nothing was going on. You could tell she had that jealous look in her eye.
Right, and make no mistake, this Sarah woman was, she was hot for Clark. She wanted him. Like there was that scene where she takes him. What was it? Was it I don't know, what is it, a dressing room? What do you want to call it? An off?
It could have been her dorm room. Who
Who knows?
knows? Yeah.
You can't really tell. There's no distinction. But 1 minute they're at the club, the next minute she's basically on the verge of making out with him in the hallway. And I'm thinking, good for me in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, good for Clark. If that was me, I would be doing the same thing. But then he starts pulling back and sort of.
I love the line where he said, I might do you bodily harm," and then he walks away,
Yeah,
frustrated.
that was funny in two reasons, because he meant that literally. And this Clark is showing some sexual restraint, whereas the last time we saw Clark on Smallville, I mean, he would pretty much, he was the Hugh Hefner of.
Of the ladies, yes.
He would just, I mean, like, until later seasons and until Jor-El had the talk with him, the sex talk, apparently, according to Clark, apparently, in the fortress. But until he had that time, he was free willing to go and do whatever he wanted. But this version of Clark has some restraint. I like that. And I like the fact that even though he doesn't have a full handle on who he is or the extent of his abilities, so he's sort of sacrificing his urges for the betterment of his prospective girlfriend, or whatever you want to call her. I like that he's showing some, would you call it altruism? What would you call that? I don't even know, but.
Well, I think what you said, restraint and just not knowing his own strength, basically.
Yeah, I mean, but it was definitely a funny piece of dialogue. And the other thing that was really interesting, and the way Clark handled it, was the realization, the conversation when they were dancing, he and Sarah, when they bring up the subject of her father,
Mhm.
and she's trying to justify, what her father does for a living, and Clark is saying, well, yeah, I get that he's your father, but he's still basically, in not so many words, tells her that he's on the wrong side of the law. And so it's very conflicting for Clark in this situation. He clearly likes this girl, but being the person that he is and his moral beliefs, he is going to find himself in opposition with her father at some point, he's thinking. So what does he do? But I'm glad that his ultimate decision was that he didn't just leave Sarah high and dry because of who her father was. I'm so glad they didn't make him go down that route, because I don't think that's what the character would do. So I'm glad that they didn't do that. It kind of looked, for a second there, I was like, oh no, is he gonna just drop her because of what her father does? Because it was looking like it might have gone down that route, but then they pulled it back and he sort of worked that out amongst himself. I guess her being kidnapped, which we'll get to in a minute, precipitated a different reaction. But still, I'm glad they chose not to do that. What about you, Sam? What were your thoughts on that?
I'm glad Clark didn't give up on Sarah, even though her father is a mob boss, because the character of Superman gives up on nobody, and he's naive in a way that he believes the good in people, even though they might be on the totally wrong side of the law, or he doesn't give up on anybody. And I think that's the character's fault to a point, but it's true. I'm glad the writers didn't take it and say, okay, Clark is in this relationship with Sarah, but her father is on the wrong side, and I'm glad he didn't drop Sarah's. We saw it towards the end of the episode. He really felt bad that this girl had to leave because of what her father did to her, and I really liked that Clark had emotions towards this girl, and really felt for her that her father was basically using her as a pawn.
Yeah, there were definite. I mean, he may ultimately love Lana, but there were definitely very strong feelings there from his point of view.
And do you notice we saw Clark in Smallville have the same feelings for another blonde, Alicia Baker. So what is Clark's thing with blondes?
I think he may prefer. He may protest too much, but I think he might prefer blonde secretly, because even in Lois and Clark, wasn't one of the police. First of all, Lana was blonde in Lois and Clark.
Yes, she was.
I think 1 or 2 episodes that she appeared.
Yeah, the alternate reality episode where Lois had to create Superman with H.G. Wells. Yeah.
We'll get to that when we get to Lois.
Yes, sorry.
Fine. But even there was a female cop investigator. What was her name? She's from the comics too. I can't remember her name. That he dated on Lois and Clark. What was?
Oh, I forgot. I forgot what.
One of the fans probably knows. Chime in on the Facebook message. Leave a message. Tell us who that is. Who the blonde that Clark dated, aside from the alternate reality Lana in Lois and Clark. But why don't we move on from the relationship angle of this episode and talk about the action and special effects? Sam, what did you think of the action and special effects in this episode?
I love the part of the episode when Clark is sitting with Matt Danner up in the suite, and he uses his X-ray vision on the bodyguard, who is Matt Danner's bodyguard, who was like, he had the bandage on his head, and he used his
Right.
X-ray vision, and there was no wound or anything because he got beat over the head because he was watching Sarah, and was kidnapped. Well, Sarah was kidnapped under his watch, so that was kind of
He
cool.
worked for the alternate. The alternate. He was working for the rival
He
mob
was
boss.
he was working for Casey, the
Yeah.
rival mob boss, yes. But it was cool because Clark, scans him with the X-ray vision, and the guy keeps looking at his watch, and he leaves to go to Casey's yacht, which is where he's all set up in one of the harbors there in Florida, which was kind of funny. And Clark catches up with him, and he changes into Superboy and just lifts the dude off the ground and just starts interrogating him in the midair, which was really, really funny.
That was pretty funny. And you mentioned the X-ray vision. This is the first time, to my recollection, of the two episodes that we see the use of two specific Superboy powers. One, as Sam mentioned, was the X-ray vision. The other was the freeze breath. And you can just give our listeners a reminder of how Superboy uses it in this episode.
It was funny. He burst into the yacht where Casey is holding Sarah, and he says that really funny one-liner because Casey says to him, "Now just freeze," and he turns the gun on him, and Superboy goes, "Freeze, good idea." And he blows the super breath and he freezes the gun in Casey's hand, which was, I thought, that was really cool.
Yeah, I gotta preface this by saying that anytime there's freezing or frozen things involved in a superhero show, I get kind of squeamish because I get flashbacks, negative flashbacks of Batman and Robin, so I get kind of shell shocked when that kind of happens. I think I should see a psychiatrist about that problem. But so I was a little bit when I heard that line, I'm like, oh please, keep it to a minimum. One is enough. So I hope we never hear one of those puns again. But
It was a cool little one-liner, I thought. John,
once and done is fine. If they start getting to 2030 in about 5 minutes, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm gonna have a problem with it. But one is okay. But I really liked the use of those powers and how they worked them into the show. And I really liked the scene where Clark was flying with Matt Danner's duplicitous bodyguard and basically threatening and pretending to drop him to get information out of him in midair. That was really cool because it again the creators and the writers seem to be calling back on Superman lore in the sense that, as Sam mentioned, in the early days, Superman was a social crusader for justice, and there were times in the comics where he would pull that trick of, if you don't tell me what I want to know, I'm going to drop you. And he again, this same kind of motif has cropped up in the newer comics, in the New 52, in the early portion of Grant Morrison's run, where Superman threatened to drop a corrupt businessman from a rather steep height, unless he basically promised to conform. So I like the fact that the writers seem cognizant of this kind of history of the character, and I like it. It adds to the show for me. What did you think of that, Sam?
yeah, it definitely harkens back to the 30s and the 40s Superman, where he just acted and didn't really question anybody. Well, he questioned, but he forced them to give him answers, no matter what. And that's what the Superboy, I think, kind of touched on, was that he's willing to do it in a way in order to get answers. I thought was really cool. And towards the end of the episode, where Matt Danner's negotiating basically for his daughter's life, I thought that was kind of, that was another mob thing, really, in this mob themed episode that we're doing today. But
yeah, even our episode is mob themed, but we'll
Yeah.
get to that. Yeah.
I mean, there was bits of dialogue that felt like right out of The Godfather, like like, oh, we'll make a deal eventually. But yeah, it was just, Matt Danner using his daughter as a bargaining chip, basically, at the end of the episode, and then her getting up and, taking a stand against her father and then leaving.
Yeah, that seems to be a classic mob storyline where the children or the families become a bargaining chip. But that's a Hollywood. No, I'm not part of the mob, so I don't know how how it actually works. Nor do I care to find out, frankly. But that seems to be the Hollywood stereotype that they keep using. I only really had one problem with this episode, and that was the fact that, again, T.J. White, the character of T.J. White, is virtually non-existent. I mean, this guy is so underused in 2 episodes, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the last 2 episodes. The first one, he wasn't really utilized at all, other than just standing and taking pictures. And this one, he was barely there, other than at the beginning of the episode when Clark and Sarah are having lunch, and he comes walking by and he laughs, and that was about it.
But on the bright side, Scott Wells wasn't in it, and it made the episode
Yes.
that much better. I tell you.
No Lex Luthor this episode, thank God.
Sam, is there anything you want to mention before we get to our rating? Is there anything else that stood out to you?
Just it was really interesting to see the different dynamic in this episode of the relationship between Clark and Lana in this episode, where Lana's the one jealous of Clark's relationship with another girl. Because usually in most of the episodes, you always see Lana trying to reconcile her relationship with Clark or Superboy and trying to date somebody else and to get away from Superboy. So it was cool to see Clark, like you said, Adam, being more of the ladies' man in this episode. And, him not... And I just thought, like, him not giving up on Sarah, even due to her father's, problems, I thought that's really true of who Clark is as a character and who Superman is. Because Superman doesn't give up on anybody, no matter what. So I thought that I really have to tip my hat off to the writers for keeping that consistent with the character.
And the end of the episode was pretty funny, too, when Lana asks Clark, they're walking away, and she asks Clark, so what did you guys do? Like, basically she's asking him, did you have sex with her? And he's like, Lana, he gets all embarrassed, and he's like, that's disgusting. How could you ask me that? So
it was cool to see her pry a little bit.
Yeah. You're right. It's very different than not only what we see in later episodes of Superboy, but also I think throughout the other incarnations of Superman, where he always seems to be the one pining or jealous. So I like the turnabout in this episode.
So what would you give the rating for this episode, Adam?
I would have to say a 3 out of 5. It was a solid episode. Sorry, 3.5 out of 5. Excuse me, because it was a solid episode. It had some good action, and the special effects were solid. The acting was really strong by the main principals, and even I thought both guest stars had great chemistry with the main cast. So it was a good episode, but I can't give it any higher than a 3.5 because it really wasn't anything that knocked my socks off, but it was a really solid, strong follow-up episode that exceeded the pilot.
My rating for the episode, I'd probably give a 3 out of 5. The reasons for that, we got to see more of Superboy's powers. That's a plus. We got to see Clark's relationship with somebody else other than Lana. That was a plus. And I liked how it went back to the original Superman stories from the 30s and the 40s. So that was my plus. The only down stuff was TJ not being in the episode at all. And, him being the ladies' man, it would have been funny to see him joke around with Clark a little bit more, give him, like, dating advice. That would have been funny. We didn't even get that.
That would have been a good use of the character, I agree.
It would have been cool to see Lana a little bit more, like her jealousy, even though we saw it maybe twice, them on the dance floor and her at the end kind of questioning, her doing her version of 20 questions with Clark. That was funny. But overall, it was a good episode. I definitely rate it higher than the pilot. The pilot had its faults.
So even though you give him the same score, you would put this one above.
I put this one above the pilot a little bit more because we got to see more of Superboy's powers. There was more action, and it was just a well-rounded episode, I thought.
Okay, good. Why don't we take a break now? So have a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll look at the second issue of the tie-in comic, and then we'll talk about some Superman news.
Sounds good, Adam. We'll talk to you guys after this break.
This is Clark Kent, and you're not going to believe what's coming up next.
We're back, and this portion of the show is dedicated to, first and foremost, the second issue of the tie-in comic. So, Sam, why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Well, continuing our theme of our mob theme this week,
Yeah, this is really, I mean,
it's
we
a
should have had some mob representative on this show as a guest. You know, a fact checker maybe, you know.
yeah, definitely. But
Where's Mark when you need him? Oh, that's right. It cost $3 million now that he's gone. Can't use his voiceover. Never mind.
nope, never
We
mind.
don't have that in the budget.
No, we don't. We don't. But in the second issue of the tie-in comic, we see T.J. White's father come to Schuster University to give a lecture on journalism. We see classic Perry White, the editor of the Daily Planet, and Clark is just totally in awe of this, and and TJ basically is rebelling against his father in this issue. He tells his father he wants to be a stand-up comedian, and Perry's like, that's great, son, but how are you gonna make a living? And he tells him, what about being a journalist? And TJ doesn't want to be a journalist. It's classic child-parent rebellion. And the issue basically revolves around their relationship, with Perry coming to Schuster, and then Perry having some sources and some information on this Italian mobster gangster family that follows him to Schuster, and they want to silence him.
Is it the Corleone family by any
It's
chance?
not the
No?
Corleone family.
Damn it, that could have been a good, crossover.
But the issue deals with Perry coming, talking to his son, talking to the students at Schuster, and then this gangster family trying to silence Perry from publishing their business in the Daily Planet, their quote-unquote dirty business in the Daily Planet. What did you think of the issue, Adam?
It was a very interesting comic. I thought it was very serendipitous that it had a mob theme to it. I don't think they planned that when they wrote the thing, but so I thought that was kind of funny. What I really liked is that I think the comic for this TV show has done better already with only 2 issues and only the first time a better job at having cameos from Superman cast members in terms of the cast of characters than any TV show or movie has done, because I thought the inclusion of Perry White here was it didn't feel forced. It felt very organic. See, because my problem with most of the Superman incarnations where the reporting aspect of it has come along is that it seems like you hear that Clark is this great reporter and this he's so good, but it seems like he gets hired on demand with no references, no proof, no work to back him up. Like, it's just nobody questions anything. Oh yeah, Clark Kent just comes along and boom, he's got a job in that Daily Planet, especially in Smallville's case. But that's another discussion.
Yeah, it was nice to see Clark actually worried about his writing and how Perry would perceive it, because there was a couple panels during the workshop that Perry's speaking at to the students that you see Clark go back to his dorm and say to TJ, he goes, I really want to write for your father's paper. And TJ's like, Clark, you already have an in. You got me. All I have to do is talk to my dad. And Clark says to TJ, he goes, I really appreciate that, TJ, but you know what? I want to make this on my own. I want to be my own reporter and not have to rely on somebody else to get me in. So that was really refreshing to see in Clark Kent in this
I like
issue.
the fact that he's working. Like, first of all, he's going to college and he's learning something. And he's working on his craft, which we never see. Not never, but rarely see in other Superman incarnations. So I like that. As I said last week, the only time we see reporting on these Superman shows or movies or comics is probably Lois and Clark was the best example of it. So I liked seeing that here. The other thing I really, really liked was the beginning of the comic where Superboy's having a leisure fly through the sky, and he's actually having fun. This is something where I think it gets lost among Superman fans, is that rarely in the comics do we see Superman having fun,
enjoying his powers for a change.
Yeah, it's always, I gotta save the world, I'm pining over Lois, or now Wonder Woman in the New 52, which, hey, I'd pine over her too, but that's another story. So he's always constantly thinking. He's always got something on his mind, basically, which is true. He's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. So it's nice to see this guy finally, in a comic book, get a chance to unwind, relax, and he had a pretty funny scene with it where he gets really close to a plane and he's obviously late for class because apparently that's a problem for Superboy, and he doesn't have a watch because naturally, why would Superman wear a watch? Or Superboy, excuse me, there again, I did it again. It's the second time on this show that I've done it again. Why would Superboy wear a watch? And so he's looking for the time. So he flies up close to the cockpit and he points at his wrist, like to the pilot. He points at his wrist, and the guy's like, they're all, the pilots are all in shock. Oh my God, we're seeing a flying man. And then the other guy's like, what does he want? He goes, I think he wants to know the time. So something little like that it was so fun and so jovial. I really, really appreciated it. And the art in this was phenomenal, especially those scenes there. I love the artist on this book. He's got a really good handle on drawing the character. And it was funny, Sam. Here's another thing I like. The mob bimbo, the blonde lady with that was flirting on Clark or flirting on Superboy at some point later in the issue. She makes a comment when she's flirting with Superboy. She's like, "Why do they call you Superboy? You look like a man to me." And that was my comment last week. Remember, I said with the art, he looked,
he looks more like Superman.
So I'm glad even the writer acknowledges it and through the characters. So I thought that was kind of neat, and I was like, hey, I agree with her. She's still a crazy bimbo, but because she's involved with the mob. But I agree with her.
Picking up from where you were talking about the female mobster
flirting.
You
call her a bimbo? I don't think that's a bad word.
Flirting with Superboy, but like when she shoots him and Superboy's reaction to being shot was like, oh my God, I just got shot, and how he winces and then he opens his eyes and he's like, yeah, that didn't hurt. I love that reaction. That was such a cool reaction.
But overall, I really like the comic. Like I said, they introduced Perry White very well. The mob storyline worked well with the actual episode that we reviewed, so it was nice. And the art was phenomenal. Is there anything else you'd like to point out, or should we just go ahead and rate the comic?
Let's rate the comic, Adam.
What would you give it, Sam, out of 5?
I give it a 4 out of 5 because it was really well done how they brought Perry to Shuster instead of making it feel like a gimmick. Him being a concerned father.
Him just happening to be in Smallville. That would have been awesome. Or Shuster.
Him just happening to be at Shuster just for that workshop would be kind of silly, but him coming and being concerned about TJ and how he's doing and checking up on him, that was, I thought, a really well done. And even the Shuster Herald workshop that they had for the writers, I thought was really cool, and that it exposed Clark to one of the premier writers in the field in Perry White. And he, at the end of the issue, Perry says to Clark, he says, I read your paper, Clark, and it was good, but he's like, you got to focus more on what makes you happy, and you got to write more from the heart. Become more experienced in writing and get it down to where you're writing from the heart. Look me up at the Daily Planet. That I thought was a really cool line. And it seems like every incarnation of Superman from Smallville, they do that send-off with Perry, where Perry says to Clark, look me up at the Daily Planet, and I'll give you a reference.
Yeah, you're right. It's very similar, right? Maybe Smallville borrowed from it. I'm going to go ahead and give this comic a perfect 5 out of 5 because you know what? I have nothing to complain about. There's no point that I would take off. I can't. I'm thinking about it and I just can't find one. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a 5 out of 5.
The only thing really I thought was Lana was kind of underused, but even she had a role in this issue. She was the one that gets TJ out of being kidnapped by the 3 gangsters, which I thought was really cool. You see Lana using her head, being smart and trying to get her friend out of the situation that he was in, being kidnapped. And then you had Clark standing next to her going, maybe I should just tell Lana so I could change into Superboy. It was kind of like a spur of the moment thing, but it was cool to see Lana using her smarts to get her friend out of danger and stuff.
Yeah, it was good to see her, like you said, take a proactive role in the saving of TJ. Why don't we look at 3 items of note, and you can correct me if there's any more that happened in Superman news-wise this week. First and foremost, we think that the Man of Steel runtime has been confirmed, and I say think because the source of this information is IMDb. So who knows? We all know how reliable they are.
They're really reliable, Adam. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, that's sarcasm at its finest. But according to IMDb, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, Man of Steel will come in at 2 hours and 28 minutes.
That is correct.
And we've looked this up, and it actually clocks in longer, about I think 13 or 14 minutes longer than Batman Begins. did, and the reason I use Batman Begins is because the origin stories, in my opinion, I think this is a great runtime because it allows you to get all the exposition that you need to do out of the way for an origin movie and still have plenty. It gives you a good balance of exposition, character moments, and action. I think it gives you enough room to accomplish all those things. Now it depends on the quality of the story and the film editing. All that will come together and determine if they've managed to pull it off in that time frame. But they have the time frame to do all that. And you know what? If the movie's good, I'd sit there for 3-4 hours. So to me, make it as long as you want, just make it good.
Yeah, it's right now it just boils down to you have the running time that's consistent with Batman Begins.
An hour and 45 minutes, like Green Lantern.
Yeah, at least it's not short where you're left wanting more.
Yeah.
It just feels like, okay, now you got the running time locked now. Now it's about execution and quality. If it's there, Superman fans are going to be excited. For 2 hours and 28 minutes, you're going to go into that theater and you are probably going to enjoy what's going to be placed before your eyes. So,
good Lord, let's hope so.
Yeah, because I really don't want to.
My heart can't take another Superman disappointment in the movies.
Yeah, I just hope it's all about execution and quality now. We got the running time, we got the rating, so let's see what they have in store for us.
My advice to the listeners, in case this is what we hope and it turns out to be good, wear a diaper to the screening, so you don't have to get up and go to the washroom. The second piece of news that we have also revolves around Man of Steel. There was another image of another theater standee that appeared, right, Sam?
It was concept art for another standee, and it was the double S logos interlocked together with Superman shooting up through the center of it. And which Superman was that, Adam?
Well, that would happen to be the George Lazenby of Superman, and Brandon Routh, poor guy.
Poor guy, yeah.
I feel real bad for him. But obviously, they didn't put any detail on his face, but you could tell from the shot. And I mean, it was darker and it was more shadowy than anything else. Couldn't really see much other than maybe the outline of the S and the outline of the body. But anybody who's followed Superman Returns will recognize that image and know that it's Brandon Routh. So it was kind of, well, at least he still lives on as Superman in a way, at least for now. I mean, those are like Sam said, concept art of a standee. So by the time you actually see that thing in theaters, I'm guessing, unless somebody at WB's marketing royally screws up, I'm guessing it'll be Henry Cavill. But for now, it's in the concept art, it's Brandon Routh. So that was kind of funny. Finally, we're switching over to the comics, and this is something I'm really excited about. Obviously, given my website, I've written an article about this at simplysupermanbatman.wordpress.com, and the article revolves around the announcement that DC Comics has confirmed a new ongoing series set in the New 52 universe, revolving around a Batman-Superman team-up. As of right now, it's been billed as Batman Superman, so it's the reverse of the 2003 version by Jeff Loeb, which was Superman Batman. It will be written by Greg Pak, who wrote World War Hulk and Planet Hulk for Marvel. He's been a Marvel guy for a long time. This is his first DC work, if I've read the press correctly. And the art will be drawn by Jay Lee, not Jim Lee, Jay Lee. Jay Lee is really, really good as well. He's done a lot of Batman cover work in the past, and he's also worked on one of the Before Watchmen miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
He worked on one of those. I can't pronounce the character, Ozymandias. I think it was that one. I'm not sure. It was that one. I don't know if I pronounced the name right, but it was that one. And his art is fantastic. The premise of the book is that, unlike the Jeff Loeb version from 2003, where the characters were already well familiar with each other and had a existing friendship, this version will see the characters meeting for the first time. And in the interview, the writers basically said that a lot of the conflict, at least to start, will arise because of their reactions to one another. So how will a fresh-faced, newly minted superhero in Superman react to this guy, borderline psychotic guy dressed as a giant bat, and vice versa? How will the very human Bruce Wayne react to a guy who can bend steel in his bare hands? And he also mentioned that he didn't announce who it was, but the villains will be very important to both Superman and Batman, and that while the book will start out in the past, or in the early days of the New 52, which would be the past in that scenario, it will have consequences on the present and future of the New 52 for those two characters. I'm really excited for it naturally because it is a pairing of my two favorite comic book characters in one book. So for me, it's like Christmas and my birthday wrapped into one. And I like the creative team. And you can bet I'll be reviewing each issue at my website, which is again simplysupermanbatman.wordpress.com. So if you want, check out my article that I wrote on the subject, as well as many of the other articles written by the great writing team that I have, which includes Mr. Sam J. Rizzo here. Check out that. And that's the news for this week. And we also have a special little segment premiering this week. Sam, before I do the honors, why don't you set it up for us?
Basically, we are going to start prize giveaways for Superboy items. But the key is you have to listen to the previous episodes. So our trivia question for this week is, Adam, you want to give the question?
Yes, I will give the question because for some reason it pertains to me. In the premiere episode, I had said that I had first watched the original Superman movie with Christopher Reeve for the first time from start to finish in a particular year. So the question is, what was the year that I first watched Superman the movie from start to finish? If you answer that correctly, we're going to give, is it two prizes?
We're going to give one 8x10 picture of Superboy from the TV show, and we're going to give away a season 1 DVD set.
And just tell everybody how we're going to determine the winner. Is it the first one, the first correct answer on the Shuster Herald Facebook group?
The first correct answer on the Shuster Herald Facebook group, yes.
Also the first correct answer in the Podbean comments? Is that how we're going to do it?
And yes, and the first correct answer on the Podbean comments underneath this episode when it is released on Podbean.
So the question again, for those who need it repeated, is what year was the first time I watched Superman the movie from start to finish? If you answer that correctly, you'll get two great prizes.
Till next time, superfans, I'm your host, Sam Rizzo.
And I'm your co-host, Adam Basciano.
And you've been listening to the Shuster Herald Podcast.